Edamame can look perfect in a pot and still disappoint you, because its best harvest window may last only 3 or 4 days. Pick too early and the beans are tiny. Wait until the pod's yellow and they become starchy. Hi, I'm May from May's Chinese Garden. Let's grow them and catch the right day. Edamame is not a different species from soybean. It is a vegetable soybean harvested while the seeds are still young, green, sweet, and tender. A soybean grown for dry seed stays on the plant much longer, until the pods and beans mature and dry. That one difference explains the title of this video. Growing the plant is fairly straightforward. Recognizing the short stage between an underfilled pod and an overmature one is where the real skill begins. But before we reach that stage, we need to choose the correct seed. Buy a variety specifically sold as edamame or vegetable soybean. Grain soybeans are selected for different qualities and may not give you the large, sweet beans you expect from edamame. Look at the days to maturity on the packet. Many varieties are ready in roughly 70 to 90 days, but climate and variety can move that timing. If you have a short summer, choose an early variety that can finish before cool weather returns. Also look for a compact or bush habit if you're growing on a balcony or exposed patio. Edamame does not climb like a pole bean, but some varieties become taller than others and may lean in strong wind. One packet may contain enough seed for several containers. Resist the temptation to sow all of it on the same day. We will use the remaining seed later to spread out the harvest. Now choose the container. For a useful group of plants, start with a pot holding at least 5 gallons, or use a wide trough. The growing mix should be at least 10 to 12 inches deep. Edamame can grow in less volume, but a larger container gives the roots more room and does not dry as quickly. Width is just as important as depth. Several plants spaced across a wide pot are better than the same number squeezed into a narrow bucket. Every container needs open drainage holes. Edamame seed can rot in cold, saturated mix, and established roots also need air. Place the pot where excess water can drain freely rather than collecting underneath it. Fill it with a light potting mix intended for vegetables. Do not use dense garden soil by itself. Soil taken from the ground can compact inside a pot, leaving the seed wet and short of oxygen. Leave a small gap beneath the rim so water can soak in without carrying mix over the edge. The next step is one many container gardeners have never considered: soybean inoculant. Edamame belongs to the legume family and can form a partnership with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in nodules on its roots. But a fresh container mix may not contain the correct bacteria. For the best chance of good nodulation, use an inoculant specifically labeled for soybeans. The bacterium commonly recommended is Bradyrhizobium japonicum. Pea or ordinary bean inoculant is not automatically the same product. Some seed is sold pre-inoculated. If yours is, follow the supplier's instructions rather than adding another treatment. If it is not, moisten and coat the seed exactly as directed on the inoculant package, then sow it promptly. Store unused inoculant as the label requires because these products contain living organisms. Inoculation is not a reason to ignore every other nutrient. The plant still needs phosphorus, potassium, and other minerals, but it does mean you should not keep pouring high nitrogen fertilizer into the pot. Too much nitrogen can encourage soft leafy growth without giving you the pod crop you expected. If your potting mix contains starter nutrients, begin with those. Add more only according to a suitable container vegetable product or a specific deficiency. Not because you think every green plant needs weekly feeding. Now wait for genuinely warm planting conditions. Edamame is a warm season crop. Sow after the danger of frost has passed and the growing mix has warmed. Seed can emerge once soil is around 55 degrees Fahrenheit or 13 degrees Celsius, but germination is usually faster and more reliable in warmer conditions. Do not plant into a cold, wet pot just because the calendar says spring. A seed that sits without growing is exposed to rot for longer. Edamame usually dislikes root disturbance, so direct sowing in the final container is the simplest method. Moisten the mix before planting. It should feel evenly damp, not muddy. Make holes around 1 inch deep or use the depth printed on your packet. Space the seeds approximately 3 to 4 inches apart across the pot. You can sow 1 or 2 extra as insurance, but do not plan to keep every seedling if all of them emerge. Cover the seeds, press the surface gently, and water with a soft flow so you do not expose them. The seed contains a large food reserve, which makes it very attractive to birds and rodents. If seeds regularly disappear from your containers, protect the pot immediately with mesh or a lightweight cover. Secure the edges so an animal cannot simply lift it. Check beneath the cover every day. Remove or raise it once the seedlings are safely established, so it does not press on them or trap excessive heat. Keep the mix evenly moist during germination. Depending on temperature, seedlings may emerge in 1 to 2 weeks. If nothing appears, do not immediately keep adding water. Gently uncover one seed. A firm seed may simply need more warmth or time. A soft, discolored seed has probably rotted, often because the mix stayed too cold or wet. When the seedlings develop their first true leaves, remove the weakest extras. Cut them at soil level rather than pulling them from immediately beside the plants you want to keep. Leave roughly 4 to 6 inches between the remaining plants if the variety and container allow it. The exact spacing can vary, so compare this with the packet. Good airflow matters, especially when several plants share one pot. Now give them as much direct sun as your space allows. 6 to 8 hours is a practical minimum for a strong crop, and more can be useful when the weather is not excessively hot. Rotate the pot occasionally if a wall or railing shades one side. Otherwise, plants may lean towards the light and shade one another. Edamame seedlings need reliable moisture, but they should never remain waterlogged. Press a finger into the surface. When the top begins to dry, water slowly until excess drains from the bottom. Do not water only one side of a large pot. Move around the surface so every root zone receives moisture. As the plants become larger, the container will dry more quickly. Wind can remove moisture almost as fast as heat, so balcony pots may need checking more often than pots sheltered at ground level. The most important watering period arrives later, during flowering and pod filling. A plant may tolerate a short dry period earlier and still look healthy, but drought, while flowers and pods are developing, can reduce the number and size of the beans. That does not mean flooding the pot. It means preventing severe swings between bone dry and saturated mix. The plants may support one another when grown in a group. If they begin leaning, add a short stake or loose ring around the group. Do not bind the stems tightly. The flowers are small and easy to miss. You may inspect the plant 1 week and see only leaves, then notice tiny pods forming close to the stems. Edamame flowers are self-pollinating, so you do not need to hand-pollinate every bloom. Your job at this stage is steady water, good light, and regular inspection. Check the leaves and young pods for damage. Slugs may attack seedlings, while beetles, mites, aphids, and other pests vary by region. Birds and larger animals may also discover the crop. Do not choose a treatment from the damage alone. Look underneath the leaves and identify what is actually present. A physical barrier installed early is often more useful than reacting after much of the plant has been eaten. If you use insect mesh, make sure air can move and temperatures do not become excessive underneath it. Always follow local guidance and the full label for anything applied to an edible crop. At this point, 5 mistakes can still reduce the harvest even when the plants look green. The first is a pot that is too small or overcrowded. Too many plants compete for light, water, and root space. The second is shade. Leaf growth may continue, but pod production can be disappointing without enough direct light. The third is excessive nitrogen. Tall, lush plants are not useful if they produce few filled pods. The fourth is allowing the pot to dry during flowering and pod fill. And the fifth is trusting the packet date so completely that you stop looking at the pods themselves. The maturity date tells you when to begin checking. It cannot tell you the exact harvest day in your container. Around 3 to 4 weeks after pods begin forming, start inspecting the plants daily. The exact timing varies, but the physical signs are more reliable than the calendar. First, look at the color. The pods should still be a fresh, bright green. A little natural fuzz is normal. Second, look at the shape. A ready pod is plump rather than flat, with the outlines of the beans clearly visible. Third, feel the pod. The beans should fill most of the space inside and sit close to one another. Research guidance describes the best stage as roughly 85 to 90% of the pod cavity filled, while the pod is still green. Open one pod as a test. If the beans are tiny and leave large empty spaces, wait a little longer. If they are full, green, and tender, begin harvesting. Do not wait for every pod on every plant to look identical. The lower and middle pods may fill before some of the smallest pods near the top. For a home container, you can pick the ready pods in 2 or 3 passes, return the next day and check the rest. If most of the pods have reached the correct stage together, you can cut the entire plant at soil level and remove the pods somewhere comfortable. This is often easier because edamame pods hold tightly to the stems. Now watch for the warning sign in the title, yellow. Once the bright green pod begins becoming dull or yellow, the beans are moving beyond the ideal edamame stage. They continue developing towards mature soybeans. The texture becomes firmer and starchier, while the sweet, nutty quality declines. In some growing conditions, the optimum commercial harvest window may be only 3 or 4 days. Other varieties and conditions may give closer to a week. Either way, this is not a crop to inspect only on weekends once the pods begin swelling. There is a simple rhythm to follow. Count the approximate maturity days, watch for pod formation, then inspect color and fullness every day as harvest approaches. Harvest in the cool part of the day if possible. Edamame loses quality quickly after picking, so move the pods out of the sun and cool them promptly. For the best fresh quality, use them within a few days. Keep unwashed or clean dry pods, refrigerated in a breathable or perforated bag rather than sealing warm, wet pods into an airtight container. Edamame should be cooked before eating, and the fibrous pod itself is normally discarded. For a simple preparation, wash the pods and boil them in salted or unsalted water for about 5 minutes until the beans are tender. Drain them, allow them to cool enough to handle, and squeeze the beans from the pod. If you have more than you can eat, blanch the pods in boiling water for about 3 minutes, cool them immediately in ice water, drain and dry them well, then freeze them in labeled freezer bags. That preserves the harvest instead of allowing a narrow picking window to become food waste. There's also a simple way to avoid one enormous harvest in the first place. Sow a second container 7 to 14 days after the first, then another if your warm season is long enough. You can also grow varieties with different maturity times. Do not keep sowing so late that the final plants run into cold weather before their pods fill. Count backwards from your usual first frost using the variety's maturity estimate, then allow extra time for slower growth as days shorten. So here's the complete plan. Choose a vegetable soybean with a maturity time suited to your climate. Use a wide, freely draining container with at least 10 to 12 inches of growing mix. Sow directly into warm, moist potting mix, protect the seed, and thin before the plants become crowded. Use soybean-specific inoculant when appropriate. Avoid excessive nitrogen, provide strong sun, and keep moisture steady, especially during flowering and pod fill. Then forget the idea that one printed date decides the harvest. Look for bright green swollen pods with beans that nearly touch inside. Test 1. If the beans are full and tender, start picking. If the pods begin yellowing, the best edamame stage is already passing. That daily check is the difference between a bowl of sweet, tender edamame and a pot full of soybeans you left 1 week too long. Tell me in the comments whether you would eat your edamame warm with salt or add the shelled beans to another dish. And subscribe for the next guide where I'll show you how to train bitter melon vertically and take it from a hard seed to its first unusual fruit.